Imagine a planet where a handful of super-rich people have taken control of most of the world's economic and social infrastructure. They have taken over the so-called intellectual property and seized most of the Earth's natural resources. They wouldn't mind privatizing the entire universe, but unfortunately for them, they don't have the technology to explore outer space. One of the intellectual officers serving this group, Klaus Schwab, described the upcoming events on this planet as gently as possible in his book, The Great Reset. And one of the stages in all of this was the privatization of nature. Let's see how this happened. At the end of 2021, an article like this appeared in the publication Natural News. Global megacorporations are starting to seize agricultural land in America to stop food production under the guise of fighting climate change. We're talking about companies that will start providing ecosystem services. Ecosystems are natural factories that absorb carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases, process dirty wastewater, and produce oxygen and clean drinking water as a result. In addition, they preserve biodiversity, the genetic codes of millions of species of animals and plants. These genetic codes will be very much needed soon by the super-rich to solve their problems in the fields of biotechnology and genetic engineering. Under sweet talk about how ownerless property or property in the hands of irresponsible entities creates risks of ecosystem destruction, new types of economic entities are being created, which must be validated by nothing other than the stock exchange. Such entities have been named natural asset companies. They are supposed to become commercial structures and make a profit by selling ecosystem goods and services, such as greenhouse gas absorption, oxygen, and clean water. As for the gene pool located in a privatized ecosystem, biotechnology and other companies can use it by acquiring a license for the corresponding intellectual property. However, only the NACs themselves can be the owners of genetic and other information related to the wild flora and fauna. All others are simply users, and on a paid basis at that. Imagine a planet where, to listen to a bird in the forest, you would need a subscription to something like Amazon Nature. The New York Stock Exchange website already has a page dedicated to natural asset companies. Let's read. NACs will reflect the intrinsic and productive value of nature and provide a store of value based on living, vital assets that underlie our entire economy and make life on Earth possible. Examples of natural assets that could benefit from the NAC structure include natural landscapes such as forests, wetlands, and coral reefs, as well as working lands like farms. On this same website, it has already been calculated that the commercial potential of natural assets is $100 to $25 trillion per year in the form of global ecosystem goods and services, such as carbon sequestration, biodiversity, and clean water. Compare this figure to the fact that all the oil and gas in the world were sold for only $4.6 trillion in 2020. Methods have already been developed for measuring the environmental indicators of NAC and converting them into monetary value. Among them are things like the sale of ecosystem services and natural capital. These indicators will supplement traditional company performance measures. The New York Stock Exchange prepared listing standards and accounting information for NAC in the fourth quarter of 2021 and submitted them to the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission. It is expected that at the beginning of 2022, the SEC will approve the submitted documents, and in 2022, the first NACs will be listed on the exchange. It all starts with acquiring land that has the potential to generate ecosystem services. NAC is a sustainable enterprise that holds rights to ecosystem services produced by natural, working, or hybrid lands. Natural lands are those untouched by human economic or other activities. Untouched. Working lands are those that are currently in active use. Predominantly, these are agricultural lands. They can be repurposed from agricultural production to providing ecosystem services. Hybrid lands, which have areas of both the first and second types. A number of billionaires have already started buying up land, beginning to accumulate natural capital and convert their virtual financial assets into physical assets. In the US, Bill Gates is most often named as the main land buyer. being the largest owner of agricultural land in America. In total, Gates owns about 242,000 acres across the United States. That's just under 100,000 hectares. Gates is not the largest landowner in the U.S. The top spot among billionaires specializing in buying up natural land belongs to media mogul John K. Malone, with 2 million acres of ranches or forests. In second place is CNN founder Ted Turner, with 2 million acres, mostly wilderness. Amazon founder Jeff Bezos is rapidly increasing his investments in land. But these moneybags with famous names are in plain sight, while the most important things, as always, are done quite secretly. After all, one of the initiators of this whole idea of selling nature on the stock exchange through NAC is none other than the Rockefeller Foundation. Among other investors turning nature into a tradable asset is the IADB, the Inter-American Development Bank, with which the Rockefeller Foundation is also working to create central bank digital currencies and biometric digital identifiers. Of course, the Rockefeller Foundation does not openly advertise its interest in this process of turning nature into a commodity. Everything is draped in words like sustainable development, nature conservation, and environmental well-being. The Rockefeller clan has been practicing all these specific operations for quite a long time. Since the days of Standard Oil, they have learned to plan and implement their strategies carefully but effectively. More than a century ago, in 1911, the court declared John Rockefeller's Standard Oil a monopoly, and the company had to split up. Despite this, it continued to control prices, and the company's subsidiaries still lead the oil market to this day. After the breakup, the government allowed Standard Oil shareholders to receive a share of stock in each of the 34 companies. This meant that each of the companies had shareholders-owners who were supposed to compete with each other. But in fact, there was little incentive for this, and the shareholders acted together, continuing to influence oil pricing. Their activities after the split were hardly monitored. This was facilitated by Rockefeller's influence on U.S. Presidents William Taft and Thomas Wilson. Rockefeller's fortune, he owned a quarter of each of the 34 new companies, was estimated at 19 in 1913. He was the richest man in the world. And now let's jump 100 years forward and quote these eloquent lines from the Rockefeller Foundation's report. During the pandemic, national leaders around the world increased their powers and imposed the strictest rules and restrictions, from mandatory face mask wearing to temperature checks at the entrances of public places such as train stations and supermarkets. Even after the pandemic was over, this more authoritarian surveillance of citizens and their activities remained and even intensified. To protect themselves from the spread of increasingly global problems, from pandemics and transnational terrorism to environmental crises and growing poverty, leaders around the world began to govern more strictly. These are words from a 2010 report called Scenario for the Future of Technology and International Development, which was prepared by the Rockefeller Foundation. Some people, not without reason, believe that this is not just an accurate prediction of the future, but actually a project that took a whole decade to prepare. And in 2020, it was finally launched. But what kind of reports is the Rockefeller Foundation releasing now, today? At the end of April and the beginning of May, the Rockefeller Foundation released a report called One for All, an action plan for financing vaccinations and sustainable growth. In June, another report followed, an updated action plan for global vaccination. All these reports stir up panic, claiming that to save humanity, universal vaccination covering at least 80% of the world's population is necessary. It is stated that the majority of humanity lives in countries with such low levels of well-being that people do not have the opportunity to get vaccinated. There are no resources. There is an appeal addressed to the leaders of wealthy Western countries and international financial organizations to find money and provide assistance to billions of the disadvantaged so that they can get vaccinated. But what is the reason for such interest from the Rockefeller Foundation in universal vaccination? Two reasons can be identified. The first is money. Robert Kennedy, the nephew of the American President John Kennedy, who was assassinated in 1963, writes in his article that the main initiators and organizers of the ongoing Great Reset can be considered to be the Rockefeller Organization and George Soros. Robert Kennedy writes about the cartel that has taken over all of America: Big Oil, King Coal, and Big Pharma, the titans of the cartel of deception and authority. In its most audacious and ruthless betrayal, this cartel has driven humanity and our planet to suicide. Their business plan poses a real threat to humanity, writes Robert Kennedy. The Rockefellers are involved in all three parts of the cartel. John Rockefeller Jr. managed to destroy traditional pharmaceuticals, which were based on natural products, replacing them with petrochemical products. He carried out this revolution in pharmaceuticals thanks to his cooperation with the Third Reich, specifically with the IG Farben Corporation. Eventually, Rockefeller acquired a controlling stake in IG Farben, which later became Bayer, the German chemical and pharmaceutical conglomerate. Robert Kennedy concludes, "Today, the Rockefeller empire, in tandem with J.P. Morgan Chase, continues to own half of the pharmaceutical industry in the United States." The second reason is control. The Rockefeller clan has been transforming for almost 100 years.
Идеям по контролю за демографическими процессами.
David Rockefeller Sr. became the founder of the Club of Rome in the late 1960s, which was intended to scientifically justify the need to restrain growth and then gradually reduce the population. We have a separate series on the Club of Rome. We recommend watching it. In the reports of the Club of Rome, the optimal population of the planet was determined to be 1 billion. All the rest are considered unnecessary. And also, before the Club of Rome, as far back as 1930, the Foundation provided financial support to the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute in its research on anthropology, human heredity, and eugenics. In the Third Reich, they moved from academic research on eugenics to practical experiments on humans. The Rockefeller Foundation continued to fund racial studies even after it became clear that they were being used to prepare for the extermination of Jews, Roma, Slavs, and other so-called inferior subhumans. The Rockefellers' support for eugenic research continued even after the Third Reich adopted the Nuremberg race laws in 1935, which were condemned by the League of Nations. But maybe all of this isn't about the Rockefeller Foundation. It's just a charitable organization that does good, caring for the health of every person on Earth. And the poorer someone is, the more care they receive. So everything you just saw isn't about our planet. But another one? Share your thoughts in the comments, and see you in future episodes on the Kramila channel.